Sold at 560.
785 the first, 785 the second, be sure, 785 the third, the final time, sold. The third and final time at £910,000, sold. Well, welcome to this latest edition of the Allsop Prop Chat, everybody. My name's George Walker. I'm joined by two gents from Harkalm, and we're going to attempt to explain Harkalm, dealer to developer, in 20 years. And it's a story of two 25-year-old chaps with an appetite for risk, two phones, a notebook. And 20 years later, they've done 500 transactions, and they want to do a whole load more. So, Adam, that's a blinding intro. How did you get here? Adam Harvey, Harkalm. Talk me through what brought you to this point.
Thank you, George. Good morning. Well, interesting story. And if you'd have told me 20 years ago, as a 25-year-old boy, that he would be sat talking through our last 20 years, I just wouldn't really have believed it. We literally started, as you mentioned, with an estate gazette directory, some cobbled together requirements. No real business experience as such. My background was working for an auction house, 6 years experience before starting Harkalm Group. And the initial few years were trading, and mainly in the room. And that's where we met, trading small high street investments.
And that's probably where you got to know your craft as well.
The experience of being at an auction house that does national investments was going up and down the country, and my early years was probably similar to yours, with an A to Z, back of the car, get out,
box of maps,
exactly right, seeing all the good, bad and indifferent towns up and down the country, which, to be fair, has really been extremely powerful and knowledgeable on the basis of seeing towns, seeing cities and understanding what they are, where they are, going back and seeing them years later, as we have done over the years, and seeing the evolution of our business from, straightforward high street stuff to the evolution of different sectors has been really invaluable.
Yep. So Ben, you mentioned as we sat down you were a musician, which I'm fascinated by. But did you start with a bit more experience and just knocking out hits?
Less in fact. It's quite a nice story, really. Adam and I sat down next to each other in the first lecture up in Leeds at university. We found after about 15 minutes of this lecture that they were telling us, you're away from home now, so you do need to buy toilet paper, and pot noodles are a good thing. Pot noodles are a good thing to eat. And we sort of sat there and we thought, what a load of old nonsense this is. And we sort of looked at each other and we said, should we leave this? Oh, can't, it's the first lecture. No, go on, let's do it. We walked down the steps. First ones, the only people to get up and walk out, opened the doors. And as we walked out, there was just a flood behind us. So it was quite a nice story of that.
Leading the market from the first day. It doesn't explain how you went from musician to property guy. Come on, in one sentence. We need to pin you down this.
It wasn't good enough. There you go.
Okay, I'll do the outro.
Yeah.
So Harkalm was formed, and I mentioned that 500 transactions. So briefly, you did start buying and selling. But that taught you so much. I mean, can you instantly recall the best deal you did?
I can think of a transaction that was, at the time we didn't realise, but looking back at it now, was the absolute blueprint of our business moving forward. And we had a relationship with Gala Coral, as they were in the day, and they had asked us, having tried to do a couple of re-gears with them, to go and buy a property that was being sold in an auction room.
This is pre-Andy Davidson. Is it Simon Leach?
It was Howard Stevenson, and the property was being sold in Leeds, guided at £90,000, shop and flat. And we had managed to put a 15-year lease together, which we had in our pockets, exchanged subject to us buying this property in the room. And the lead-up was interesting.
Sorry, you exchanged the lease before you bought it?
Well, in of itself, when you think about it, when I think about it, we were probably 26 at this point. I don't know what Howard saw in us, but he decided that we were the go-to people to try and secure this property that was on for £90,000 in Edison's room
with a flat.
With a flat, exactly, up in Leeds.
I bet he didn't want the flat.
Middleton Park Circus. He didn't want the flat. We had an interesting time with that as well. But we, at the time, which is something we would never, ever do now, and actually we've built a business and a reputation on never doing this, we knew that Betfred were also after it and William Hill were also after it. So we thought we'd put ourselves in a position where we could control the market. Is this a bit too much?
That's fine. Yeah, I think I know what's coming here. Come on.
Ben was very relaxed before the lot came up, and I was extremely nervous. And as the lot came up, I'd been in a room and as auctioneer, never bought anything in the room, but I'd been in the room, got some brilliant experience. The guide price was £90,000 and the auctioneer says, right, shop and flat, gave the description. Do I see £90,000 anywhere? There was probably, I'm guessing, at 500 people in the room. Maybe I'm exaggerating, but it felt like that. And I put my hand up and said 150, at which point people around me looked back and laughed at me. The auctioneer
learned from Tony Colucci, obviously.
The auctioneer didn't know what to do, and he was a bit shocked. And he went, "Okay, well, 151 anyway, 151." And he took about a minute, and eventually someone put their hand up at 151. He then says 152. I said no, 155. He then mentions somebody wants to go home with this. No further bids. Hammer goes down. Ben and I look at each other, walk to the back of the room. Howard Stevenson is waiting for us at the back of the room, almost hugged us. He says, "Have we done our deal?" We've done our deal. Bang, weird. Bought a building for, I think it was around 20,000 quid per annum for 155 grand. And even in those days, there was 6%-ish.
Plus the flat.
Yeah, plus the flat.
So really what we're saying here, I mean, that's a long time ago in a different auction house, I'm pleased to say. But isn't that about knowledge of the market? So you're taking a punt. You've learnt to appreciate that a tenant is not just someone who pays the rent. You can get a relationship with them. And you know, that's looked after so many investors, developers over the years. I like this tenant. They like us. Okay, let's see if we can do business. Because these tenants, whatever the high streets happened, they do want to expand. They want to be the right lease and the right properties in the right place.
Well, the best call that you could get, and as we developed those relationships and realised that we were onto something, and what we were onto, which we didn't probably realise immediately, is adding value. And that's really been the cornerstone of our business moving forward. How can we add value? How can we asset manage this? But, you know, the real brilliant bit about it is when a tenant comes to you and you've got that relationship and says, "Oh, hello Ben, hello Adam, I've got this little shop up in Fingerpost St Helens. If my name gets involved in it, if the price goes up, you come along, buy it for 150, 200 grand, we'll give you a 15-year lease at 20,000 quid." And, you know, off
and
you
actually,
go.
so the original seller gets a competitive price and the tenant gets the new lease in the place they want to be. And so, I mean, is that, you're honest enough to say we're probably quite lucky with the first one. That was a year into this, but it's something you built. But if you're 25, 30-year-old sitting at home now listening to this, is there a bit of magic or is it hard work to get those relationships?
In all honesty, in those days, we were still doing 25 transactions a year. So we were buying and selling, and I think we just trusted our market knowledge and we knew the market inside out.
Is it easier with the web now? Has intelligence changed much in that 20-year period, do you think? Well, so 15, isn't it?
I think
probably hasn't changed dramatically.
I think in those days, we were able to go in the regions and go and buy stock and moving away from the asset management element, because we would be going out and buying buildings, income producing buildings, and we just used those relationships, which were multifaceted. So you'd do re-gears, we would start understanding what worked and why they worked for operators. And I think 20 years ago, landlord-tenant relationship was extremely different. And I think that got exaggerated in COVID.
What do you mean by different? Different to now?
Well, I think it's different to now because I think people realised in COVID that actually, for the first time, landlords had to really take note and think, well, I'm not getting rent from this tenant. There's nothing I can do about it. And suddenly people realised, hang on a minute, if my building's underperforming, then I haven't got a brilliant asset. And I think, realised that from an early stage. So if the operator was doing well, we were doing well. So if we were able to buy a building cheaper, we would reduce the rent. And we always thought we want an under-rented building rather than over-rented building.
It's easier to sell, isn't it?
Easier to sell because people look at it, and I think the market was still relatively knowledgeable to what rents pound per square foot were. I think it's become more of a metric now, but back in the day it was income, but people still identified rents and buildings and looked at buildings per rents. But now that relationship has totally transformed. And I think, I mean, maybe the bright guys back in the day were doing the same thing as we were, but we realised very quickly if we could build our relationships with the operators, then that was going to be a good thing for us.
You need it to be a win-win, and that's what we're always really looking for. We want to win. We want the tenant to win, and as you start to develop that market knowledge, we quite quickly with the bookies, because we then went on to do many bookies.
It's a good lot size, isn't it?
Great lot size for a company where
popular,
we were.
Popular. People know it.
People know it. You get a 15-year lease. We followed them around a little bit because at that time a lot of the banks were closing. A2 use, very easy deals. We weren't.
A2 use means no planning consent.
No planning consent, straight in. Yeah. And the amazing thing was, as we moved into 2008 when the crash came, we were looking at deals at 11, 12% in places like Bamber Bridge in Preston and these sorts of places, and thinking, I don't know if this is a good deal or not, but we trusted that it would come back. And actually at that time, and for somebody starting out, this is, I would say, why it is a bit more difficult now. At that time, we were able to take borrowing at 90p in the pound off investment value rather than acquisition value. So we were able to take all our profit out, put no money down.
So I mean, this is, and I've been banging on about this week. So my role as an auctioneer, I think the 08-09 was pretty brutal. But actually, to get debt of more than 60% post 09 is almost impossible, which is, I think, partly why our market at the moment is not exactly alive, because people don't have to sell. But then 90p in the pound, and one of my clients not so far from here was getting 105p in the pound because he had to pay stamp duty.
But the point is, though, we still trusted the market, even at that.
But interesting, Adam, because no one had ripped up a lease in 08. You got to COVID and people just ripped up leases. I mean, you look at some of these. I mean, the JDs didn't pay any rent. Sports Direct, what do they pay? People took these government subsidies and didn't pay them back. That the lockdown completely changed relationships. So probably with the prospect of tenants thinking they can rip up leases, they need to be in the right building at the right rent. Otherwise, they're going to walk.
And you need your tenants to survive.
And you need
a symbiotic relationship. Yeah. As we sort of walk through a little bit our journey, we trusted ourselves in that 2008 moment. And actually, some of the best times we've had, and certainly allowed us to take it to the next level, was when the market came back in 9 and 10, then we started putting them to the room. And these things that we bought at 11 and 12s were 6% again. Yeah. And they were happy days. We had some fantastic times in the room.
Very busy times.
It did prove that, to us at least, that long income was always going to have a value. And so in those days, we were getting 15-year leases. Clearly, the high street evolved, and those 15-year leases became 15 with a break at 10, which then became 10s with 5s, and we know where that's gone, the high street market. So it was a natural evolution for us to sort of migrate away from the high street and try and look at alternative use, and we'll talk about that, I'm sure.
And I think that's probably the time to slightly jump, because you've done a wonderful circuit of certainly our teams, and I'm sure others in the West End, what you're looking for. You're very multi-sector, very cross-sectors. And I'm particularly interested, so this leads us on from the occupiers. I mean, spreading a risk. I saw a church on your presentation. Lots of nurseries. I mean, the nurseries, the rents are pretty strong. But I mean, there's some solid occupiers out there you believe in? I mean, how many actual operators do you work with?
So I'll sort of walk you through the journey to get there, and the nursery market opened up for us. With the sort of use class becoming an E, we were able to go out and buy office buildings when the market was in a really poor place for lots of guys looking at PD model, and we were able to then look at a totally different sector where I don't think others were looking at. So we would, for example, go into an old NHS building, which was pretty dilapidated, consented for 25 units. The local market...
Resi units.
Resi units. The local Resi developers were sort of seeing our bids, laughing at us, thinking that they don't know the pound per square foot, and all of a sudden, brand new day nursery, spanking unit to the likes of an N family who were, at that time, growing. We were sort of one of the first big, I would say, propcos to have a look at that sector.
And so just to be clear, so you were looking at a building which the market thought was just going to be residential, and you could bring Ben's added value thing by saying, right, 50 or 100 grand to a nursery, and you do some flats as well?
We would have a nursery on an overriding lease, and all of a sudden you've got 4 rent checks a year. The tenant had just spent, £2.5 million on a building. Suddenly it looks pretty appetising, and now you sort of look at that, and the actual numbers work on the basis that if they go, the capex has been spent, you've got another operator to go in there. So there was quite a few moves in between that sort of day nursery sector for us, because we migrated away from the high street first into roadside. And from our point of view, we're property investors, and what did we know about roadside? But we very quickly realised that having bought a bit of land down in Gosport, the chap at Starbucks then, a chap called Dan Goodman, who was head of acquisitions at Starbucks. This is our first sort of foray into the roadside market, and he gave us a 20-year lease. He was acting for, at the time, 23.5s. They're now been bought back in by the main co. And
So explain that.
so,
It's a franchisee of
it was a
Starbucks.
franchisee model that we
Starbucks.
worked with. They
So
built
Starbucks name above the door.
correct,
Yeah.
and they built 100 units. And to be fair, that in the last year has been bought back in by Starbucks. So you've got the main co on there.
Yeah.
But at that time, we were seeing the high street market shorten in terms of the leases, and we just looked for the same model in terms of where do we go to go out and find the long income
But you're
stuff.
seeking the holy grail, which is long income.
Long income.
Yeah.
Where are the acquisitive retailers? Who are the acquisitive retailers?
Who's actually
what
got
are the
requirements
acquisitive?
list? Yeah.
What are the acquisitive sectors? And where can we get that long
So
income?
you want some tenant tension to give you those longer leases.
Yeah,
I mean,
and-
and if our investors, a lot of them, if they're honest, they want the ability to sit in their flat or on their boat and have no concerns about their investments. And a drive-through or a 20-year lease to a nursery it fills a requirement.
This
doesn't
is it. You've got
full repairing and it's 4 checks a year.
Yeah, you've got 4 checks a year. You've got kickers on the rent
leases.
reviews. So, they're 20 or 25 years. The sectors are part government funded in terms of the nurseries because you've got the 3 hours, and that's actually increased. There's a lot of consolidation in that market as well. So you've got an operator called Kinder Zimmer, for example, who are German backed. There's Dutch in the market. We just bought quite a large portfolio of another operator who's backed by a French entity called Maison Bleu. So
Harkalm's going global.
yeah,
I mean, you've got,
Yeah.
German tenants, French tenants. Are you working with them yet?
yeah. I mean, these guys have come into the UK market and they've bought and backed entities in the UK because there's a massive market for
I bet
it.
you never thought 20 years ago you'd be doing that. That's good.
And someone said to me quite recently, what you need to be doing in order to build a team is just employing people that are better than you. And I do feel that if people aren't better than me, they've certainly got specialist knowledge. And we realised that what do we know as property, investors, stroke developers, we need a specialty. So every sector that we're involved with, we employed a specialist. So our main sectors are, as you know, the convenient supermarket model, and 2 of the chaps in our office were at Tesco's. These guys know what they're looking for, why they're looking for it. So we've employed specialists in every sector. So we've got a chap who was doing the day nursery market. Send schools as well is another sector that we've got ourselves involved with. The roadside, as I mentioned, Dan was at Starbucks beforehand. And every sector that we now look to go into, we'll just employ a specialist that has got...
Standard.
Yeah,
Okay.
as-
I want
as
to
an
come on to
operator.
some of your specialists later.
Yeah.
Just let's finish the sector chat. I mean, roadside, 50 quid a foot in Folkestone sounds quite a lot of money, but are you confident these rents are there to grow?
Well, you've got to look
And I'm
at...
not specifically looking at your asset, but I mean, I've seen 50 quid a foot for an auctioneers. Oh, my Lord, that looks like a lot.
They have. The rents in the drive-through sector have pushed on massively. When we started with our first one in Gosport with the Starbucks, the rent was 70 grand for a 2,200. Planning took ages. We kept pushing the rent up and up as the build costs went up as well. And now you're seeing rents which are 130, 140 at the top end for 1,800 or 2,000 square foot. Point is, they're making the money. They are making what we have been told, and again, market specialty. These guys are making 5 and 6 times more on a drive-through than they are on an inline on a high street unit.
And really, the rent there, I mean, we were taught with a tape measure and a square footage. It's actually number of cars going past the door, isn't it?
That's right.
I always say to the team that rent looks a lot per square foot. Yeah, but you stand on the corner of that roundabout and you see the cars going past. The Travelodge we sold 2 auctions ago, it was just a busy spot. Therefore, it's worth a lot more than rate per foot. And this is what the drive-throughs are proving.
Yeah, and you know what? That actually goes for all the sectors. And I think if you're looking at, this is I think for any investor, somebody who's a seasoned investor or somebody who's trying to come through, what's the business plan of your tenant? When we look at the nursery guys, we want to see, okay, when are you breaking even in this unit? How many kids do you need to make it work? How much are those kids paying per day? And does the business plan work? Is the rent sustainable?
You also mentioned something else there, a bit of government. We love a bit of government subsidy. I'm a farmer's son, so, I've had a lot of that. But, I mean, do parents get government sort of grants for any of this?
Well, 2 different sectors there. But in the nursery sector, we reckon it's about 30% government funded
Like
with
that.
the 3 hours. Because
tax.
obviously it kicks in when they're, I think, 2.5. But that's actually changing as well. So there's going to be a bit more of that. But in the SEND sector, which we think it is a great opportunity, although there's quite a lot of press around how much money the government is actually spending on that, or the local authorities are spending on that.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but SEN, special educational needs, can you summarise what that is?
So,
because not everyone's going to be 100%.
Yeah, of course. So,
in terms of real estate,
everyone will be familiar with kids who have certain needs,
special educational
needs, which it has a range, and that might, lowest range, they stay in mainstream education, but they have a bit of extra time or an extra teacher.
But I guess you're dealing with the more extreme up the scale.
Yeah, as you work through up the scale, they're kids who need specialist education outside of mainstream. So it's a private sector where there's quite a number of operators, and they run these special educational needs schools.
And in terms of real estate, how big's that? What does it look like, 5,000 feet?
They tend to be 10,000. They're very specialist, as you can imagine, and depending on the level of acuity is how many teachers per student and what have you. But that stuff is 100% funded by the local authority. So every kid up to the age of 16 certainly has a legal requirement to be educated by their local borough. If they can't be educated in mainstream, then they will be paid for due to their needs at a special educational needs school. But they're private entities who are running it, but that is 100% essentially government backed.
So take that to the bank and they'll be delighted, is what we're saying. So you've got absolutely bulletproof covenant.
Absolutely
That's really good. And how many SEND units are you sort of doing a year producing to the market? Are you doing 5? Are you doing 10?
We're doing half a dozen. It's a sector that's sprung up for us in the last couple of years. And I must say on that note that the idea that 20 years ago that we were doing bookies on high streets and now Harkalm are doing special educational needs schools, which not just from a financial point of view, but also from our ethos, culture, and giving back, is quite a nice thing and a round thing for me. I think it's from my personal sort of standpoint and values, is a really good thing to be giving back to the community, because the government haven't got the dough to be doing this. They require private entities like ourselves to be out there acquiring the real estate, facilitating this, and that is 100% for sure. So.
Yeah, but interestingly, if you're dealing with property investment, what you are doing, quite simply, is following the market. You found a tenant that you like the look of them, they like the look of you, and you're moulding your progression with a special education needs sector. So what other sectors, briefly? I mean, food stores, your 3,000 to 5,000 foot food store, is that saturated yet?
The interesting thing from us, and it's something that we will talk about shortly, is using our prop tech and how we go about doing that, because it's a big buzzword, isn't it? And nobody really understands necessarily what it is, but we use that and data. And from our point of view, we're now in a place where we are almost advising our operators where they should be. So they might have their requirements, but because of our in-house expertise, we know what they need. We know where they need it.
I'm going to say it then. Right, data scientists. I've never seen a data scientist on a small propcos roster. Talk me through the data scientist person. Obviously, you're not going to tell us everything about why you've got someone in data. In fact, you've got 2 data specialists on your team sheet. How much can you say?
I pinched myself a couple of weeks ago when I'm in a meeting where I've got an AI specialist, data scientist next to me, and I'm trying to follow a conversation and I'm not that bright, so I wasn't really able to follow it, but I do understand what we need. And the world has moved on, and from our point of view, I mentioned that we know what our operators need and where they need to be. And we can't sit around and wait for the market to...
So their measurements are, obviously it's unit size, but they want footfall, they want population density.
And
whether it's a school or a food store.
And not just that, it's the affluence of the area.
Okay.
What's the basket size? All of these things that go into what the retailers make up, but they're slow. Their requirements at times can be a little bit behind where we are. So what we're trying to do is get ahead of that.
And we have, within our sectors, built the knowledge to know where they should be, so we can identify buildings, and we identify buildings and can go out and target those buildings. That's as simple as it gets. So we've got a real mixture of working, and I do believe that there's always going to be room for acquisition agents, and we use them regularly, and I'm pleased to say that we're delighted to do that. And the good old-fashioned relationship building is still at the forefront of our world. And I tell the younger generation to get out the office and go and meet people. So for all the younger listeners out there, do not hide behind your laptops. Get out, meet people, because what AI and tech can't do is build relationships for you. So you're only as good as your network. So continue to do that. But what we're trying to do is balance the old and the new. So the old-fashioned relationship building and going to find some opportunities off-market that we can then essentially, what we formed as a dating website for properties and tenant requirements and tenants, placing tenants with buildings. So
It's not a public website. It's your own. Your own platform.
It's our platform. And if you are looking for a dating website, you won't find it at Harkalm, but we can probably recommend some for you, George.
Quite a few years ago.
He's full of he's all heart, this chap.
Look, I couldn't tell you exactly when it was, but it was part of our progression. We had a very strange business coach, and we didn't get that much out of him. But one thing he did say to us was, you can't run a supermarket on corner shop practices. And that is good advice. As you get bigger, you can't hold it all in your head. You need processes. And that's something that every business goes through. And that's where we're at. And that's why we need people who understand the process.
And you're right, Ben. We're seeing 5,000 opportunities a year, of which we're transacting on 30 roughly. So that is a hell of a lot of sifting through opportunities. It really is.
But from a seller's point of view, if you want to buy something off them, you're paying a market price, but also you won't be messing around. So when you say I'll pay you £3 million, what you will do is pay them £3 million. So that's quite helpful for the market because no one's frightened of someone making a profit, provided if you agree a price, they deliver. And that's what you're saying you're doing is you're researching these, and you're not wasting time on crumbs 4,940 transactions.
That's right. And you have to remember, 90% plus of the buildings that we're buying these days are vacant buildings. So you've got lots of different people with buildings that are underperforming, that are costing them a huge amount of money. They haven't got the ability themselves to go out and either go and get planning or go and find an operator. And
so security, rent, insurance, leaks, repairs, management. Yeah.
Right.
We don't like that.
So to go from A to B is not so simple because we're taking vacant buildings, underperforming assets, where we're then able to go out, acquire these, consent them, convert them, and turn them and polish them into what we would consider to be a long income asset. And we know what that looks like because we've got a huge amount of expertise in-house. So we've got in-house legals, we've got in-house project management, we've got in-house operators, as we've spoken about. So we take it from beginning to end, and we like to think that we know what an institutional grade investment looks like.
Is this a JV situation with you, or are you just buying outright these vacant lumps?
We have always worked on our own account. So everything we've bought, and we've stayed private, as we mentioned earlier. Yeah. So there's 4 of us in the office with skin in the game, essentially. We don't know where that will take us, but ultimately that's what we've managed to do.
Yep. Okay, that's a pretty clean outfit, and you're in control. Which is
absolutely
great.
Right.
You get through holidays and holidays with that. Good. So you've done 20 years, you survived, you're still talking to each other, which I think is amazing. What's it going to look like in 20 years' time? Are you going to be 10 times the size? Are you going to keep it to a real good, tight-knit team? Are you going to be listed?
It's a really interesting moment for us. We're at the moment doing 50 to 60 million pounds worth of acquisitions a year.
Yeah.
We are doing roughly 25 transactions, so equivalent of a couple of £1 million on average lot size. I have got a 2030 plan to take this to between 85 and 100 million quid. And at that point, Ben, we'll need to shake the coffers and see where we end up in terms of how we're going to afford to continue to grow that business. But what I would say is the platform's built. It's just now about where the sectors will take us to. And we have got some really interesting sectors that we're currently doing our DD on.
So with all this consolidation in the REIT market, how many times a year does a REIT tap on your door saying, what about it? Any listed vehicles had a go at you yet?
Not really, but as Adam says, if we're going to... 20 years is a long time. It feels like a long time. But the benefit of starting very young is we've still got a long way to go.
He's looking at me very intensely now. I know I'm not young.
No, and I do feel like we're just growing into our straps, and I do feel like there's a long way to go. It's an incredibly cash-hungry business. That is the reality of it. When you want to do on your own account, which is what we've done from the very beginning, from 2 phones in a Estates Gazette directory, we have done this on our own. And there's bank finance out there, but I definitely wouldn't say never to somebody coming in, just because the cash demands of this business.
Well,
we want to take it where we're going to go.
Your balance sheet becomes a check, and that's different. If you can provide the returns, and there's the challenge, but you've got to track record for that.
Absolutely. I do think that in summary, we've got a huge amount of sector experience, and what we're trying to do now, which is something that we really are working quite hard to do, is bringing it together to try and do some bigger transactions, because we can use our cross-sector experience to essentially put that under one local centre, for example. So we want to buy some single sites. Instead of it being 2 million, we can multiply that up, so we can bring all of our sector experience into buying one bigger investment.
Okay, Adam, so let me ask the question. You are now on the spot. You've got a £5 million windfall. You've got 5 years to turn it around and make as much money as you can with your expertise, inspiring people out there.
Okie dokes, here we go. I'm going to buy an empty office building, which I will convert into a day nursery. I'm going to pay probably somewhere in the region of £1 to £1.5 million and rent that out for maybe 150, 180. Secondly, I'll buy a bit of land, go and consent that for a roadside user. And thirdly, I would go and buy a sen. I'd go and buy an empty unit for a sen. I mean, our main
Special education
sectors.
needs,
Yeah, I'll go and buy. And
have you spent all your you have spent?
I've spent the £5 million.
£5
You can do some numbers probably better than that.
And you're
going
to get it all done in 2 years, not 5. Right, Ben, you just got £5 million windfall. A family trust says, I want this to give me 4 checks a year for the next 15 years.
Yeah.
Where are you going?
I would buy a convenience store investment. I mean,
Big convenience store.
It's a big convenience store. Maybe I should say this, maybe I shouldn't. It does surprise me sometimes when people are happy to pay the same 5.75 or 6% for a covenant that isn't making money that they will pay for a £1 billion company like Tesco. If you want it to be safe as houses, and what I'd really try and do is have some long-term planning gain in there. So I knew, 15 years, 4 rent checks a year, and if anything goes desperately wrong, in the last 3 or 4 years, I can consent something up and
Which
do a
is
big scheme.
probably driven by postcode, isn't it?
Yeah. It'll be southeast. It'll be southeast. It'll be edge of conurbation. We would be looking at what's the town planning going on there. Are we moving out? Is there a convenience store that we can put there that in the long run could be some housing
Convenience
and consent
retail.
it up? Yeah.
Fantastic. Gents, you've been excellent. Thank you very much. We've used our time and I really appreciate it. We're here to inspire the people that come to our auction on a regular basis. 20 to 30% is new every time. And I hope the story today we've heard from Ben and Adam gives you some inspiration, and sort of the old codgers like me. There's plenty of money to be made out there. You just gotta have capital and appetite for risk. So thank you very much, Adam.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Ben.
Thank you very much.
Brilliant.
Appreciate it.
And we look forward to any feedback direct to us, please. george.walker@allsop.co.uk. And the details to contact Adam and Ben, if you want to, will be in the episode notes on our website. Thank you very much.